The military freighter Endless Dawn moved slowly through the purple clouds of the nebula. It was a large ship, carrying supplies and soldiers to Station Myra on the far side of the galaxy. Most of the crew was sleeping. The night shift was quiet, and nothing interesting ever happened during these long trips through empty space. Sergeant walked through the lower decks with a tablet in his hand. He was 32 years old, with a tired face and calm eyes. His job tonight was simple. He had to check all the cargo bays and make sure nothing was wrong. Smugglers sometimes hid illegal goods on military ships, and Command wanted everything inspected before they reached the station. Had done this job many times before. He walked past rows of metal crates, scanning their codes and marking them on his tablet. Everything was normal. Everything was boring. He was thinking about his bed and wondering how many hours of sleep he could get before his next shift. Then he heard something. It was a small sound. A soft whimper like a wounded animal, stopped walking and listened. The sound came again from somewhere nearby. He looked around the cargo bay and saw nothing unusual, just crates stacked on crates all the way to the ceiling. But the sound came a third time and now could tell where it was coming from. There was a large crate in the corner, unmarked and unlisted on his tablet. That was strange. Every piece of cargo was supposed to be registered. Walked toward the crate. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. When he reached the crate, he pressed his ear against the cold surface. He could hear breathing inside. Something was alive in there. He looked at the locking mechanism. It was a simple design, easy to open. Hesitated for a moment. He should call security. He should report this and let someone else handle it. That was the proper thing to do. But the breathing inside the crate sounded so small, so frightened. Opened the crate. Inside, curled up in the corner like a ball, was a child. She was not human. Her skin was pale purple, almost lavender, and covered with strange patterns that glowed faintly in the dark. Her hair was white and tangled. Her eyes, when she looked up at him, were silver like mirrors. She was wearing torn clothes that were too big for her thin body. Around her wrist was a metal tag with words written in a language did not recognize. But he recognized the symbol stamped on the tag. It was the mark of the Dominion, the alien empire that controlled most of the galaxy. The girl stared she did not scream. She did not cry. She just watched him with those silver eyes, waiting. Her glowing patterns flickered weakly like a candle about to die. Had heard about her kind. They were a peaceful species from a world called Velar Prime. 3 years ago, the Dominion had conquered their planet. Most of them had been killed or taken as slaves. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones were sold to fighting pits and entertainment centers across Dominion space. This girl was one of the unlucky ones. Looked at the tag on her wrist more closely. There was a name written there in small letters, and below the name was a destination code, Crucible Station, the fighting pits. She could not have been older than 8 years old. Something cold settled in stomach. He had seen many terrible things in his years of service. He had learned to look away, to follow orders, to do his job and not ask questions. Humanity was neutral in galactic politics. They had treaties with the Dominion. They did not interfere in the affairs of other species. That was how humanity had survived in a dangerous galaxy. But looking at this child, found that he could not look away. Flinched when he moved. It was a tiny movement, barely visible, but saw it. She expected him to hurt her. She expected pain, because pain was all she had known for a long time. Slowly reached for his communicator. His hand hovered over the button. One call and security would come. They would take the girl and return her to the Dominion. It was the legal thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. It was what any sensible person would do. Turned off his communicator and put it back in his pocket. He did not know why he did it. Maybe it was the way she looked at him without hope. Maybe it was the memory of his grandmother, who had survived terrible things during the wars on Earth. Maybe it was simply because he was tired of looking away. Removed his jacket. It was warm and thick, standard military issue. He knelt down slowly so he would not scare her and held out the jacket. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Did not understand his words. They had their own language, and she had probably never learned standard. But something in his voice made her pause. The flickering patterns on her skin grew a little steadier. Draped the jacket over her shoulders. She was shivering, he realized. The cargo bay was cold, and she had been in that crate for who knew how long. "Can you walk?" he asked, miming the action with his fingers. Looked at his hands, then at his face. Slowly, carefully, she nodded. Helped her out of the crate. She was so light that it scared him. Her bones felt like bird bones under her skin. When was the last time she had eaten a real meal? When was the last time anyone had been kind to her? He picked her up. She stiffened in his arms but did not struggle. She was too weak to struggle, or maybe she had simply given up. "I'm going to help you," said, even though she could not understand. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to try." He carried her toward the back of the cargo bay, where the maintenance corridors began. These were narrow passages that only engineering crew used, full of pipes and cables and shadows. They were not on any official map. If was careful, he could move through them without being seen by the ship's cameras. Behind him, the empty crate sat open and abandoned. Tomorrow, someone would find it and report it. The cargo manifest would show one unit missing. There would be questions and investigations. But by then would have hidden the girl somewhere safe. He would figure out what to do next. He would find a way to keep her alive. As he walked through the dark corridors within his arms, thought about what he was doing. He was breaking the law. He was risking his career, his freedom, maybe even his life. The Dominion did not forgive people who stole their property, and to them was just property. But when she rested her head against his shoulder, too exhausted to stay awake, knew he had made the right choice. Some things were more important than laws. Some things were more important than treaties and politics and survival. Some things were worth risking everything for. The ship continued its journey through the nebula, carrying its cargo of supplies and soldiers toward Station Myra. And somewhere in its hidden corridors, a human sergeant walked through the darkness, carrying a small piece of hope wrapped in a military jacket. Neither of them knew what the future would bring, but for the first time in a very long time, slept without nightmares. 3 weeks passed on Station Myra, and every day felt like walking on thin ice over deep water. Had hidden in his quarters, a small room on the lower levels of the station where junior officers lived. The room had a bed, a desk, a small bathroom, and a window that looked out at the stars. It was not much, but it was private, and privacy was the only thing keeping them alive. During the day, went to work like normal. He attended meetings, filed reports, and followed orders. He smiled at his fellow soldiers and made small jokes. Nobody suspected anything. He was just the quiet sergeant who never caused trouble. But inside, his heart beat fast every time someone looked at him for too long. Every knock on his door made his stomach drop. Every announcement over the station's speakers made him freeze, waiting to hear his name called for arrest. At night, he returned to his quarters and took care of. She was getting stronger. In the beginning, she had been too weak to stand, had fed her small amounts of food, afraid that her stomach could not handle more. He had cleaned her wounds and given her medicine from the station's medical supplies. Slowly, day by day, the color returned to her skin and the light returned to her patterns. Was a fast learner, taught her simple words in standard, pointing at things and saying their names. Water, food, door, window, stars, safe. She repeated the words carefully, her accent strange but understandable. And she learned his name. She said it softly, like it was something precious. Her favorite place was the window. She would sit there for hours, pressing her small hands against the glass, watching the stars move past. The station rotated slowly, so the view changed all the time. Sometimes they could see the nebula in the distance, purple and pink clouds glowing against the darkness. Sometimes they could see other ships arriving and departing, their lights blinking like fireflies. One evening, turned to with a question in her silver eyes. "Why?" she asked. Her standard was still broken, but she was getting better every day. "Why you keep me?" Sat down beside her at the window. He had been expecting this question for a long time. He had thought about how to answer it, but he still did not have good words. "Because you needed help," he said finally, "and I was there." Thought about this. Her patterns flickered gently, blues and purples mixing together. Had learned to read her patterns a little. Blue meant she was thinking. Purple meant she was calm. Red meant she was scared or angry. Others were there, said. Before, they did not help. Nodded. He understood what she meant. She had been passed through many hands before she ended up in that crate. Soldiers, traders, slavers, many people had seen her. None of them had helped. "I cannot speak for others," said. "I can only speak for myself, and I could not look away. I could not pretend I did not see you." Was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly she leaned against his arm, just a little, just enough to feel his warmth. They sat together and watched the stars until fell asleep. But secrets are heavy things. The longer you carry them, the heavier they become, and eventually they become too heavy to carry alone. It happened on a Tuesday. Was at work when he received a message on his tablet. Surprise inspection of lower deck quarters. All officers must clear their rooms for review. His blood turned to ice. He tried to think of options. He could hide somewhere else on the station. But where? He did not know the station well enough to find a safe hiding place. He could take her to the cargo bays, but those were monitored by cameras. He could try to smuggle her onto a departing ship, but he did not have access to the docking areas. There was no time. There was no solution. There was only the cold knowledge that everything was about to end. Returned to his quarters and found sitting at the window, looking at the stars. She smiled when she saw him. She did not know that their time together was almost over. He sat down beside her and tried to find words to explain. But before he could speak, the door opened behind them. Lieutenant stood in the doorway. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for following rules. She was one of the officers in charge of the inspection, and she was looking directly at with an expression that could not read. For a long moment nobody moved, nobody spoke. The silence was thick enough to touch. Then stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Sergeant," she said slowly, "do you understand what you have done?" Stood up and placed himself between and his heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Yes, sir, I understand. The Dominion will demand her return. They will demand your arrest. Command will have no choice but to follow the treaties." His voice was flat and cold. "You will be executed, both of you, as a message to anyone else who thinks about interfering." "I know." Stared at him. Her eyes moved too, who was watching from behind with wide silver eyes. The girl's patterns were flickering red now. Fear. Something changed in his face. It was small, just a shift in her expression, but saw it. It was the look of someone remembering something painful, something they had tried to forget. "Report to Docking Bay 12 in 6 hours, said quietly. "There will be a maintenance shuttle, one pilot, no passengers listed." Blinked, "Sir. There is a colony on the far edge of the Helix Arm. Humans who disagree with our government's policy of neutrality. They call themselves Haven," turned toward the door. "They might be willing to take you, both of you." She opened the door, then paused without looking back. "I had a choice once," she said. "During the conquest, a refugee ship was asking for help. My commander ordered us to ignore them. I followed the order." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "I still see their faces when I close my eyes." She stepped through the door and closed it behind her. Stood in the silence for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. Then he turned to and knelt down in front of her. "We are leaving," he said. "Tonight, we are going somewhere safe." Looked at him with those silver eyes that had seen too much pain. "Safe," she repeated. "Real safe." Took her hand and held it gently. "Real safe, I promise." 6 hours later, a maintenance shuttle departed from Docking Bay 12. Its flight plan showed a routine repair mission to a nearby satellite. Nobody noticed that it never returned. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a human sergeant and a child flew toward a place called Haven, carrying nothing but hope and each other. The journey would take 3 weeks. It would be dangerous and uncertain. But for the first time since had opened that crate in the cargo bay, he felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt like he was doing the right thing. And that feeling was worth more than all the rules and treaties in the galaxy. Haven was not what expected. He had imagined a military base, hidden and fortified, full of soldiers preparing for war against the Dominion. Instead, he found a small colony on a frozen moon, where 200 humans lived in buildings made of stone and metal. There were farms under glass domes, schools for children, and a market where people traded goods and stories. It looked like a village from old Earth, simple, peaceful, real. The moon orbited a gas giant on the far edge of the helix arm, so far from the center of the galaxy that the Dominion had never bothered to claim it. The soil was poor and the winters were harsh, but the people of Haven had learned to survive. They grew food in heated greenhouses. They built homes that could withstand the cold. They created a life where none should have been possible. When shuttle landed on the icy surface, a group of colonists came to meet him. They were armed, but they did not point their weapons at him. They simply watched and waited. A woman walked forward from the group. She was older than maybe 60 years old, with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen many things. She moved with the confidence of someone who had commanded soldiers and made difficult choices. Her name was, she was the leader of Haven. She looked then at, who was peeking out from behind his legs. The girl's patterns were flickering between blue and purple, curious but cautious. "You are the one from Station Myra," said. It was not a question. "The one who stole Dominion property." Straightened his back. "She is not property, she is a child." Studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes, she is. And that is exactly what the Dominion will never understand." She knelt down to look at eye level. Her voice became gentle. "Hello, little one. You are safe here. No one will hurt you." Did not understand all the words, but she understood the kindness in them. Her patterns shifted to a soft blue. She stepped out from behind and looked at with her silver eyes. "Safe?" she asked. Smiled. It transformed her stern face into something warm. "Safe, I promise." That first day, learned the history of Haven. Had been a commander in the human military, respected and decorated. During the conquest, she had received an order to ignore a refugee ship filled with civilians. The ship had been in human space, asking for help, but command had decided that helping them would anger the Dominion. Had refused the order. She had tried to help the refugees, but she was too late. By the time she arrived, the Dominion had already destroyed the ship. She was court-martialed and discharged, but she was not broken. She gathered others who thought like her, humans who believed that neutrality was just another word for cowardice. Together, they had built Haven. "We are not an army," told that evening as they sat in her small office. "We do not have the ships or the weapons to fight the Dominion directly, but we do what we can. We take in refugees. We hide those who would be killed. We refuse to look away." Thought about Lieutenant who had helped him escape. He thought about all the people on Station Myra who had seen in that crate and done nothing. And he thought about himself and the choice he had made. "I understand," he said. "I want to help." Nodded. "Good, because you have brought trouble to my door, Sergeant. The Dominion does not forget. They do not forgive. And when they find out where you are, they will come. When asked, not if. When confirmed. It is only a matter of time. The question is not whether they will come, but whether we will be ready when they do. The months that followed were busy ones. Learn to work the land, growing food in the greenhouses alongside the other colonists. He helped repair buildings and maintain equipment. He trained with the small defense force, learning to use the weapons they had salvaged and repaired. And he watched grow. The girl was like a flower finally receiving sunlight. She learned to speak standard fluently, her accent fatting with each passing week. She made friends with the other children in Haven, running and playing and laughing in ways she had never been allowed to before. Her patterns grew brighter and more stable, no longer flickering with fear. She started calling something new, not just his name but a word that she taught him. It meant one who shields. It was the closest thing in her language to the word father. Did not correct her. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset through the dome of the greenhouse, asked him a question. Will they come for me? Her voice was calm but could see the flicker of red in her patterns. She was old enough now to understand the truth. The Dominion, will they find us? Could have lied. He could have told her that they were safe, that no one would ever hurt her again. But he respected her too much for lies. Probably, he said, someday. Nodded, she had expected that answer. What will happen when they come? Put his arm around her shoulders. She was 12 now, taller than before, but still small. Still the same girl he had found in that dark crate 4 years ago. We will fight, he said, all of us together. Will we win? Thought about the Dominion's warships, their armies, their weapons that could destroy moons. He thought about Haven's 200 colonists with their salvaged rifles and their stubborn hearts. Maybe not, he admitted, but winning is not the only thing that matters. What matters is that we stand. What matters is that we do not give up. What matters is that we show them something they have never seen before. What asked? Looked at her, at this child who had taught him more about courage than all his years of military training. That some things are worth dying for, he said, and some people are worth protecting, no matter the cost. Leaned against him, her patterns glowing soft purple. I do not want you to die. I do not want to die either, said, but I would rather die standing than live kneeling, and I think you understand that, little one. Was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. Yes, she said, I think I do. They sat together and watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was searching for them. Somewhere out there, danger was growing closer with each passing day. But for now, in this moment, they were together, they were family, and that was enough. 3 months later, the sky filled with ships. The Dominion had found them, and the battle for Haven was about to begin. 12 warships hung in the sky above Haven like dark clouds, waiting to release a storm. They arrived without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Each ship was massive, built for war, carrying weapons that could turn the frozen moon into a field of craters. Against them, Haven had no fleet, no orbital defenses, nothing but stone buildings and stubborn hearts. The message came through on all frequencies, broadcast to every speaker and screen in the colony. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated from the Dominion's language into perfect standard. You are harboring stolen property belonging to the Galactic Dominion. You are harboring criminals who have violated sacred treaties. Return the designated and the human designated. Surrender all those who have helped them. You have until dawn. If you do not comply, this colony will be destroyed. There will be no second warning. The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. Silence fell over Haven like a blanket of snow. In the command center, a small room filled with old computers and maps gathered everyone who could fight. 47 people stood before her, Young and old, men and women, farmers and engineers. They were not soldiers. They had no training except what they had learned in the years of waiting, but they had all made the same choice. They would not run. They would not surrender. "We cannot win," said. Her voice was calm and clear. She had accepted the truth a long time ago. Not in any way that they would understand. They have 12 ships. We have old rifles and determination. The math is simple. No one spoke. No one needed to. "But we can show them something," continued. "We can teach them a lesson they will never forget. They think we are weak. They think we value our lives more than our principles. They think that when faced with death, we will break." She looked at the faces around her. "Let us prove them wrong." In the corner of the room stood with his arm around. She was 16 now, almost as tall as him. Her patterns glowed with steady determination, blues and purples mixing together. She was not a child anymore. She understood exactly what was happening. Earlier that night, she had tried to give herself up. She had come to with tears in her silver eyes and told him that she would not let everyone die for her. She would walk out alone and surrender to the Dominion. Maybe they would spare the colony. Maybe her death would buy the others more time. Had held her as she cried. He had stroked her white hair and let her feel his heartbeat through his chest. And when she was calm, he had made her a promise. "We do not trade lives," he said. "Not yours, not anyone's. You are not a thing to be given away. You are a person. You are my daughter, and I will stand beside you until the end." Had looked at him with those silver eyes that had seen so much pain and found so much love. "Even if the end comes tonight?" she asked. "Especially then," said. Now standing in the command center, reached out and took his hand. Her grip was strong. Her patterns did not flicker. "I am not afraid," she said quietly. "Neither am I," replied, and he meant it. The battle began at dawn. The Dominion troops landed in waves, hundreds of soldiers in black armor pouring out of. They expected a quick victory. They expected the humans to surrender or die within minutes. They were wrong. Haven's defenders knew every tunnel and corridor of their colony. They had spent years preparing for this day, building traps and hidden passages, learning every shadow and every corner. They did not try to fight the Dominion in the open. Instead, they vanished into the walls and struck from darkness. Led a team through the ventilation systems, moving like ghosts above the enemy soldiers. They dropped explosives through the grates and collapsed entire sections of tunnel on advancing troops. They fired through small openings and disappeared before the Dominion could return fire. A medic named kept fighting even after his left arm was shattered by enemy fire. He refused to retreat, carrying wounded colonists to safety one by one until he finally collapsed from blood loss. Even then, he kept giving orders, telling others where to find medical supplies. A teenage girl named had been a technical genius before the war. She hacked into the Dominion's communication systems and filled them with false orders and static. Enemy squads turned against each other. Reinforcements went to the wrong locations. Confusion spread through the invasion force like a disease. Hour after hour, the battle continued. The Dominion pushed forward, but every step cost them dearly. For each colonist who fell, 3 enemy soldiers were killed. The frozen ground became stained with blood, both red and the dark blue of Dominion warriors. 14 hours after the first shot was fired, the Dominion commander finally cornered and they were in the last shelter, a reinforced bunker beneath the colony's main building. 47 colonists had come to fight. Now only 19 remained standing. They formed a wall of bodies in front of, their weapons raised, their faces bloody and exhausted. The commander walked forward alone. He was tall, with gray skin and eyes like black holes. He did not wear armor. He did not carry a weapon. He did not need to. Behind him stood 100 of his best soldiers. "This is illogical," the commander said. His voice was flat, confused. "You have lost. Your colony is destroyed. Your people are dying. and yet you continue to fight for one child, one creature of no value, one piece of property. Raised his weapon. His hands were steady. Behind him he could feel presence, her patterns glowing bright with love and fear and something else, something like hope. That is the thing you never understood about us, said. One is everything. One person is not a number. One life is not a calculation. One child is worth more than all your ships and all your empires. The commander tilted his head. You would all die for her. Yes, said 19 voices at once. The commander was silent for a moment. Something flickered in his dark eyes. It might have been confusion. It might have been doubt. The Dominion had conquered 100 species across 1,000 worlds. They had always won because they understood the math. They understood that most beings would choose survival over sacrifice. But these humans did not follow that logic. These humans stood together, ready to die, and they did not tremble. Before the commander could respond, a new sound filled the air, a signal cutting through the static, a human signal broadcasting on all frequencies. This is the free ship Defiance. We are joined by the vessels Steadfast, Iron Dawn, and 17 others from the colonies of the Helix Arm. We are responding to the distress call from Haven. Dominion forces, you will withdraw immediately or face destruction. His heart stopped. Then it started again, pounding harder than ever. Through the bunker's small window, he could see the sky filling with new lights. Ships were arriving, dozens of them, human ships from colonies across the Arm. They were not military vessels. They were cargo haulers and mining ships and old transports, armed with whatever weapons their crews could find. They were not an army, but they were enough. The Dominion commander looked at the sky. He looked at the wounded colonists who still refused to kneel. He looked at whose patterns were blazing with light, and at who had started all of this by opening a crate in a cargo bay. This is not over, the commander said. The Dominion does not forget. Neither do we, replied. The Dominion forces. Their ships rose from the ruined colony and joined the fleet in orbit. For a long moment, both forces faced each other, human and Dominion, weapons ready. Then the Dominion fleet turned and jumped away, vanishing into the darkness between stars. In the bunker, someone started crying. Someone else started laughing. Bodies pressed together in embraces, the living holding the living, grateful to still be breathing. Felt arms wrap around him from behind. Pressed her face against his back, her patterns pulsing with colors he had never seen before. Joy and relief and something deeper than words. You kept your promise, she whispered. You stood beside me. Turned and held her tight. Around them, the survivors of Haven began to sing an old Earth song, something about never walking alone. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. And for the first time in history, the Dominion had met something they could not understand. Humanity. 10 years had passed since the Battle of Haven, and the galaxy had changed. The Dominion still existed. They still controlled vast territories and commanded powerful fleets, but they had learned caution. They had learned that some species could not be conquered with math and logic. They had learned that humanity was dangerous, not because of their weapons or their numbers, but because of something far more powerful. Their stubborn, impossible love for each other. The story of Haven had spread across the galaxy like fire. Humans who crossed the stars for a single child. Humans who stood against impossible odds and refused to break. The survivors called it the Night of Standing. Other species had other names, but they all told the same story. And that story had changed everything. The free colonies of the Helix Arm had grown from a handful of hidden moons to a network of dozens of worlds. Refugees from Dominion space fled there, knowing they would find shelter. Species that had lived in fear began to hope. Some even began to resist. Haven itself was no longer a small village on a frozen moon. It was a city now, with buildings that reached toward the sky and streets filled with people of many kinds. Humans and others all living together, building something new. At the center of the city stood a memorial. It was a simple thing, just a wall of polished stone with names carved into its surface. 63 names. 63 humans who had died in the battle. 63 people who had chosen to stand between a child and death. Stood before the memorial, reading the names she had memorized long ago. She was 26 years old now, tall and strong. Her patterns glowed with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was. Her white hair was cut short, and she wore the simple clothes of a teacher. That was her job now, working with refugee children from across the galaxy. She taught them to read, to write, to speak standard. She taught them that they mattered. The children called her a word that meant Mother of Fire. She had not chosen the name. They had given it to her because of how she made them feel. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. She did not need to turn around. She knew those footsteps better than any sound in the universe. Walked up to stand beside her. He was older now, his hair more gray than black, his face lined with years of hard work and harder choices. But his eyes were still the same, still calm, still kind, still the eyes of the man who had opened a crate and found a frightened child inside. "Nervous about the speech?" he asked. Today was the anniversary of the battle. Every year, people gathered at Haven to remember what had happened, and this year had been asked to speak. She would be the first non-human to address the United Colonies, the first to tell the story from her side. Terrified, admitted, "What if I cannot find the right words?" Looked at the names on the memorial. He had known some of these people. He had fought beside them. He had watched them fall. "You will," he said. "You have had good teachers." Smiled. "I had one good teacher. The rest I figured out myself." Laughed. It was a good sound, the sound of someone who had found peace not through victory but through purpose. He had spent the last 10 years helping to build Haven, training new colonists, teaching others what he had learned. He had never returned to human space. He had never regretted his choice. "Would be proud of you," he said quietly. Had died 3 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the people she loved. In her last days, she had told that she finally understood why she had survived when so many others had not. It was so she could see this, the future they had built together. "I know," said. "I think about her every day." They stood together in comfortable silence, reading the names of the dead. Then reached out and took his hand, the same way she had done when she was a frightened child. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for opening that crate, for staying, for being my father." Squeezed her hand. There were tears in his eyes, but he was smiling. "Thank you for letting me," he said. Later that afternoon, stood on a stage before thousands of people. Humans and a dozen other species, all gathered to remember what had happened 10 years ago. Cameras broadcast her image across the colonies. Millions more were watching from distant worlds. She had prepared a speech, full of careful words and proper phrases, but when she looked out at the crowd, she put her notes away. The right words had found her at last. "They ask me sometimes," she began, "why humans fight so hard for strangers, why they cross stars and sacrifice everything for people they have never met." She paused, looking at the faces before her, young and old, familiar and unknown, all watching her with eyes full of hope. "I tell them about a night 22 years ago when I was just a child. I was alone in a dark crate, waiting to be taken to a place where I would die. I had given up hope. I had accepted my fate. I thought no one in the universe cared whether I lived or died." She found in the crowd. He was watching her with tears running down his face, but he was smiling. He was always smiling now. And then a man opened the crate, a human man with tired eyes and a kind voice. He looked at me, a child of a species not his own, a creature the galaxy had decided was worthless, and he did something that changed everything. His voice broke for a moment. She took a breath and continued. He gave me his jacket. He picked me up and carried me to safety. He risked his life, his career, his future, everything he had. For me, for a stranger, for one small girl who had nothing to offer him in return. The crowd was silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That is what makes humans special, said. Not their technology, not their strength, not their weapons, but this impossible, beautiful belief that every life is sacred, that no one is too small to save, that one person is worth the universe. She felt her patterns glowing bright, brighter than they had ever glowed before. All the love and grief and gratitude she had carried for 22 years poured out of her like light. The have an old word. It means one who carries the fire. We believed that some souls were born to burn bright, even if it meant burning out. She looked at the man who had saved her, at the father who had raised her, at the hero who had taught her what courage really meant. Humans are, all of them. They carry fire in their hearts, and because of them, because of what they taught us, because of the example they set, that fire has spread. It burns in Haven. It burns in the colonies. It burns in every refugee child who learns that they matter. It burns in me. Raised her hand toward the sky, toward the stars, toward the future. They asked me to speak for the dead today, but I think the dead would want me to speak for the living. So here is what I have to say. She took a deep breath. We are still here, we are still standing, we are still fighting for each other. The Dominion thought they could break us with fear. They were wrong. They thought they could divide us with hate. They were wrong. They thought that kindness was weakness and love was foolishness. They were wrong about everything. Her voice rang out clear and strong. We are the children of Haven. We are humans and 100 other species who have learned the same truth. We carry fire, and as long as one of us remains standing, that fire will never go out. The crowd erupted in cheers. Thousands of voices raised together, shouting and crying and celebrating. Stepped back from the stage, overwhelmed by the sound. Was waiting for her at the bottom of the steps. He opened his arms, and she walked into them, the same way she had done when she was 8 years old and terrified. I'm proud of you, he whispered into her hair. I learned from the best, she said. They stood together as the cheers continued, as the sun set over Haven, as the stars came out one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars they had watched together through a window on Station Myra so many years ago. The universe was vast and cold and often cruel. The Dominion still threatened. War still loomed on the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new dangers. But tonight, a father and daughter stood together, surrounded by the family they had built, and that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.